it's just about being more purposeful. You're never going to get the whole life that you want, but can we have more of a life we want? I think we can.
Welcome to Conversations with Loulou. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Louise Lambert, who's here to talk to us about a topic that is very close to my heart, and that's positive psychology. Dr. Louise is not only a licensed psychologist, she is also a published author and the editor of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology. She also hosts her own podcast, the Global Wellbeing Initiative. As entrepreneurs and business leaders, many of us go through lots of ups and downs, and I have learned firsthand that there is no price that you can put on having a healthy mind. And that is why I'm really looking forward to have a conversation with Dr. Louise to learn more about positive psychology and how we can implement it in our daily lives. Let's talk a little bit about positive psychology, your domain of expertise.
Yeah.
So how do you define it? What is it exactly?
So the formal definition, if you will, is the scientific study of well-being, which sounds a little bit fluffy, but essentially if we think about probably the best way to understand positive psychology is to contrast it with mainstream psychology.
Okay.
So for a very long time, we studied what I call the doom and gloom, how to be depressed, how to be anxious, how to be angry, jealous, all of this stuff. We could tell you how to mess up your marriage, mess up your kids. We were great at that. But what we forgot is that there's another half of human experience, and that is meaning, purpose, joy, interest, curiosity, inspiration, all of these things that really make us want to get up in the morning. And these are also worthy of scientific study. So positive psychology just really extended the science to the other half of human experience. And now we use the same scientific tools, the same drive, if you will, for empirical evidence, but focused on the positive side of what makes life great and joyful and wonderful and what we all want it to be.
Okay.
So it's a huge change.
So do you see clients for that, or do you practice it? Or
so I am a psychologist from Canada. I trained as a doom and gloom psychologist initially, and then I moved into positive psychology. Now in the UAE, I teach. I do a lot of research, but I also do training in organizations and schools, all largely around positive psych. So teaching people, there's a number of different strategies that we know work. We've tested them worldwide, including here in the Middle East. And these can be packaged into strategies and tools to help people improve quality of life and life satisfaction.
Okay. Are there certain key pillars or strategies that you can share?
So yeah, they're not top secret.
Okay.
And they sound really silly, almost wimpy. But when you think about, some of the treatments that we have for depression, some people will write out their thoughts, dispute their thoughts, challenge their thoughts. Mm-hmm. And positive psychology, you can use it for depression. In fact, that's where it started.
And trauma, right?
Trauma, so much. Really? I mean, now there's probably applications for that, but definitely it started as a clinical treatment for depression. So that's where it really started. So we know it's quite strong in its evidence. Today, everybody can use it. So different strategies might be simple things like savoring. So when you're having your coffee in the morning, be there, savor it, smell it. Describe it.
Okay.
Kind of get lost in it. I know that might take 2 seconds, but most of us just kind of gulp it down, get on through the day.
Probably while doing like 10 other things as well.
Exactly. And it's really just about, we're surrounded by goodness. We're surrounded by sources of positive emotion and meaning. We have everything for a good life. We just don't see it. So some of it is training ourselves to see, to notice, to appreciate, to extend positive emotions. There's also different strategies, some that are called capitalization. So how we respond to other people. So we can also increase the quality of our relationships through a lot of these strategies. Some of them have to do with thinking about meaning, purpose, and values, why we do what we do, aligning that with our activities. So we feel a bit more congruent. We feel a little bit more like our values match our lifestyle.
Okay.
That's important. Other things also thinking about character. Who are you? Right? So some people really focus on integrity, persistence, being dependable, being reliable. Other people might be more curious, more helpful. So when we know what we're good at, it's really identifying your strengths. And when we can live those truths, again, across our life activities, we tend to be happier. So there's a whole range of different activities like that. And again, they've been empirically validated, with kids, with adults, with elderly, across a range of different cultures and populations. And we know that they work. And they work over time as well. I think that's the other important piece. So lots of things we do make us feel good. It might last a minute. Yeah. Buying a pair of shoes. Woohoo. You hit the parking lot. The joy is gone. So many of these strategies also look at how do we extend these states of happiness over time as well.
Is that mindfulness, or is it a different concept?
So mindfulness can be part of that. So there's probably about 60 different interventions within the field of positive psychology. So mindfulness sort of started under a different tradition. It's since been adopted into that. Okay. So that is one of them. But there's, again, savoring, gratitude, capitalization, values identification. Like there's a whole bunch.
Do we need to be happy? Because I think there's a pursuit of happiness that is sometimes problematic, right? Because people see other people as happier. Yeah. So is happiness, the norm? Should we be in a constant state of happiness?
So I think, and I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of people are like, oh, hey, we should be happy all the time.
Yes.
I'm like, no.
Actually, you're under pressure.
Yeah, that's annoying. And sometimes it can be really fake. So we need to be careful that we're not pursuing it directly. So happiness, if you pursue it too much, and we have studies showing this, actually makes people unhappy.
Okay.
But also, again, you talked about social media. We see all these happy people, and it's like, hey, look at my latte this morning. Yes. And I think,
even the latte is perfect.
Even the latte is happy, exactly. And that does make people unhappy. So I think we need to be sort of mindful. I hate the word happiness. I use it because it's the word people understand. But what we should be using is maybe just living a good life, a life that fits for you, a life that is meaningful, a life that is interesting, a life that is nice to live, a life that is loving. And that's really, in the range of all these emotions and all the range of all these strategies, you pick the definition that fits for you. So I think to put happiness as the goal puts a lot of pressure on people, but also, no, you shouldn't be happy all the time. Because that actually means you're manic, and maybe we need to medicate you. That's a sign of a mental illness, right?
Okay.
So I think being mostly happy when it's time to be happy, but then also making room for sorrow and grief and disappointment, because we have to go through those, but also there's a lot we can learn from that too.
Yes.
And also moments where we feel nothing.
Nothing.
You're just in neutral.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't always have to feel something.
So what is neutral?
When you're driving home from work.
Okay. Thoughts going through your mind?
Out, or you're just zoning out.
Okay.
Or you lose yourself in time on the treadmill. Like, that's okay. We don't always have to be feeling something specific, or always thinking about how do we remove an emotion. So one of the things I really like about positive psychology, it really looks at kind of the bigger picture of emotion regulation. So there are things we can do to upregulate our emotions, to downregulate our emotions, to kind of clear out some of the space. Mindfulness would be a good example of that, where you just kind of go into a little bit of nothingness, and that frees you up to do other things. So it's about finding the tools and the strategies to kind of choose your mood and choose your moment to the extent that you can. Okay. Sometimes we can.
I was reading a book called Authentic Happiness.
Okay.
You might be familiar with it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And he talks a lot about, how we always try to pursue these little bouts of happiness, but these are, obviously non-lasting, and that's not the way to achieve happiness on the longer terms.
Well, yes and no. So we do need those little hits of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So the latte, a little chocolate bar, pair of nice shoes never hurts, right? But that just can't be your only thing. And in part because, as you say, it doesn't last very long, but also we habituate, we get used to these things and they kind of lose their value over time. So we need the small hits of joy and happiness during the day to give us the fuel, if you will, to carry on. And then we also need the bigger ticket items, kind of the deeper stuff of meaning and the pursuit of goals and accomplishments and relationships. And these are things that take much longer than a minute to do.
So actually, I just want to recap for our audience. So if you had to define positive psychology in a few words, what would it be?
The science of well-being.
The science of well-being.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of the science of well-being, there's a trend currently happening, mostly in the US, where you hear a lot about the Great Resignation. Mm. So there's a lot of people, in millions actually, quitting their jobs. I know that in our part of the world, we're usually a few years behind. So I think whatever is happening there, we'll probably catch up within a few years. So what should employers do in this case?
Well, I think, we talked about meaning, values, but there's other things, particularly in workplaces, that make people happy, and that's flexibility, autonomy, self-determination, relationships. So it's looking at the things that matter. So I think we've moved beyond the point of just giving people more money, moving money anywhere. But people are looking for a lot more than that. And I think this is what's also stemming that Great Resignation, where people are like, look, if it's,
so what do they want?
Money, I think people want to feel good at what they do. So they want to be able to choose. We think, so there's a concept called job crafting. And job crafting stems from positive psychology as well. And it's looking at, out of all the tasks you do, how can you craft the job you have into one that you like more? Mm-hmm. So that could be saying, okay, I don't like these tasks. Anybody else want these? Okay, you can take those. I'll take your, kind of like a little bit of exchanging different tasks. You can also look at, changing up timing, doing things on your schedule. So now we get into flexibility. Do you want to work mornings? Do you want to work afternoons? Do you want to work from home? Do you want to work in an office? So giving people more choice. I also think people want to work with other people they like and who hopefully like them back. That is sometimes possible, sometimes not. Mm-hmm. But how do you forge good relationships at work? Or at a minimum, then just at least less contact if there is friction. This we can do maybe not by the forced pizza parties that we sometimes see, yes, but by giving people, meaningful projects to work on, or trying to align, you two kind of have the same interest. How about you think of, taking on this project or yes, that project, aligning people maybe a little bit more alongside their strengths or compatible strengths. So you're not putting everybody with the same strengths in one team, then they start to compete, but maybe complementary strengths where they can work together and you're not a threat, I'm not a threat, but somehow we manage to create something beautiful. Mm-hmm. So I think these are kind of some of the deeper issues that people are looking at. I also think during COVID, we had this wonderful luxury to stay at home.
Yes.
Our quality of life went up for a lot of people, and now organizations want us to come back. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't think I want to give that up.
And that's mostly why a lot of people are resigning, actually.
Yeah, right? Once you've had a taste of that, yes, why would you want to go back to your office? Mm-hmm. So I get it. So organizations will need to think of a way of how do you bring that same freedom and quality of life into work so that people don't have to leave work to get it, mm-hmm, or quit your organization to make that happen.
I love that. So how do you make it that they have a great life within the organization so that they don't have to seek that great life outside?
Yeah.
Do you work with employers, right, here in the UAE? Do you find them receptive to things like that? Because it's one thing to tell people, find something that you love, do something that, you're passionate about, etc. But also the reality is that, a lot of companies are not as receptive.
And in some companies you can't. Somebody needs to be at the front desk. Mm.
So is there maybe, because companies care about their bottom line, right? So they want to make money at the end of the day.
As they should, yeah.
is there something that, you could tell companies or employers when, about the benefits of introducing flexibility and some of these other benefits to employees?
I think it would increase a lot of loyalty. So if you can strike that balance, and it's going to look different in every organization. Again, somebody has to be at the front desk, but there's other tasks that can be done perfectly well from the living room. So in those cases, it's really maybe going through role by role, even task by task, thinking about what can be done elsewhere. But also, does the person want to? Not everybody also wants to stay at home. I'm thinking of moms with kids, and they're like, please, can I come back?
Yeah.
Right? So it's really having
single people actually as well.
Yeah, or not. I don't know. So it's really about, having those conversations with managers and saying, what can we do to keep you here? What was great about COVID for you? What was not so great about COVID for you? Or forget COVID, going forward, how can we make this better for you? And really having those conversations and being open to some of those answers. Some things can be done, some things can't, but I think simply asking the question. So I see a lot of organizations, and I get it. You've got a lot of real estate. Somebody has to occupy the building. And maybe, that is the way it needs to be done for the moment, but over time, people will vote with their feet, so to speak. So I think, we need to be mindful of people's experiences at work matter, and those experiences matter to them. Whereas before, maybe they push them aside a little, well, I have a job, I'm being paid. Now people, I think, are having a little bit more courage to say, no, actually, everybody else is quitting. That company's doing it. Why can't you? They're demanding a lot more. So I think we're kind of in this exciting work transformation, even here. And as you say, it might catch up, take a little while. But I think some of the bigger companies are starting to have those conversations and will be able to make some of those adjustments.
I think a lot of companies, they kind of say, well, we need people to be back because of these impromptu water cooler conversations, the culture and all of that. I don't think it's about real estate. I think it's more about trust. I feel that there isn't trust in employees in general. And I think that's kind of like the root of the issue. But a lot of the employers would say it's more the culture, the camaraderie that you build within the workplace, etc.
And that's okay. But then I would also ask, did we really have that before COVID? So Gallup has come up with a lovely model that I really like. And what they've said is, look, if it can be done at your kitchen table, go do it at your kitchen table. Because actually we know that when people are in the workplace, they are less productive because of all the chatting, the interruptions, this, that, and the other. So for companies to be paying people to be less productive doesn't really make much sense. On the other hand, bring people in, but bring them in for a reason. So maybe everybody needs to be in the office on a Wednesday, but on a Wednesday, no, you actually don't have a desk, and no, you're not doing desk work, but Wednesdays are specifically for group projects, meetings that we must have, and that cannot be an email, for these thinking sessions, creativity and innovative, processes, but things that can only be done in groups. So then now you've given me a reason to come here.
Yes.
I don't want to do that on Zoom.
So not to come there, open my laptop and do presentations.
This is silly, right? And I've seen people, they're on a Zoom meeting and they're like, Bob's over there and Jane's over there in our offices on a Zoom meeting. This is ridiculous.
Yes,
right?
That's true.
So I think there's other ways to do things. And it's just kind of to look at this, like what is it we're paying you for? Can that be done elsewhere and better? Then why are we paying you to come here?
And what is your advice to the individual in that case? So, they're in a job, COVID happened, now they're asked to be back, or probably they're back already. I think a lot of people are back in the office. Yeah. So maybe what is something that they need to be asking themselves, maybe?
Well, I think asking themselves, but also having conversations with their managers and saying, look, this is what I actually do during the day. When I'm here, this is what that looks like. When I'm at home, this is what it looks like. What would you prefer? So I think it's kind of making a case for yourself, showing the evidence and, state your case, try. At worst, your manager will say, no, we need you back. All right, then you've got options and you have decisions to make. But if you don't say anything and you just come back and sit down and resume, it's very hard to backtrack in 8 months because you've been back for 8 months now.
Yes. Yes.
Or however long.
Yes. But beyond like the work from home, work from the office topic, is there something else that you think, people need to be asking themselves more generally about what they're doing?
I always think that, but I think...
Because you spoke earlier about like taking stock of things, right?
Yeah.
Gratitude, savoring things and all of that. So a lot of us live our lives on autopilot. We go to the office, we come back, we do the same thing, take the kids, etc. So there's, and then one day, it's happening to me, like you hit 40 and then you're like, okay, stop. What's going on? Am I happy? Am I not happy? Is this what I need to be doing? So this is what I'm trying to, maybe like if you are an employee today and you need to take stock of what you're doing, are there any questions you should be asking yourselves?
Well, I think that's the question you've asked yourself.
Okay.
I'm 47. I'm also asking myself that question, is this really what I want? So there's a great strategy. It's Japanese. And it falls under that positive psychology intervention. And the strategy is a little bit morbid, but it's think about your death.
Okay.
So if you had 24 hours left to live, what would you regret not doing the most?
What would you regret not doing the most? Okay.
And I think suddenly it's like, oh, this puts things really quickly into perspective. For me, I don't have enough fun. Like I work. I enjoy what I do. I do get satisfaction out of that, but I could spend more afternoons at the beach. So during COVID, that was one of the questions I asked myself is, coming out of this, I was a bit anxious coming out of it, not for COVID, but more for the fact that I just thought, oh boy, here we go. Everybody's going to start running at breakneck speeds again. I don't want to go back to normal.
Yes.
I don't want to do that. No, everybody stop. Like back to the beach, right? So I think it's really about taking control over things and going, look, life is short. COVID has showed us that. Life is short. Lots of things can happen. Now we've got Ukraine and Russia. These are serious things. We've got climate change coming.
Yes.
Now that doesn't mean
that's
throw
the biggest
caution
one.
to the wind. Exactly. It doesn't mean throw caution to the wind, but I think it's really about being purposeful about your life. What do you want? What matters most? Do that. Or do those things. And I think, tapping onto this great resignation, I think a lot of people are asking themselves those questions. What matters?
So how do you do it? You take a notebook and you start writing? Like, how do I start? I don't know. Where do I begin with?
I think it's to think about the times when you're happiest.
Okay.
What is that? Where are you? So maybe I'll interview you now. When are you happiest? And it doesn't need to be happy like this.
Yes.
Happy can be focused, in the zone, feeling purposeful, energized, feeling like, yeah, I'm doing stuff, like whatever your definition of happiness is. When is that?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I think when I'm working, that's going to sound very boring to whoever is listening.
No,
but
not at all.
I think I enjoy spending time with my kids on certain occasions because a lot of time
24/7.
No, and a lot of times they're fighting, so it's actually no fun spending time with them at all. But I think meaningful work, having these conversations with very interesting people, finishing a project, making an investment. So,
and you've crafted your life to do that more often.
I'll try, yes. Yeah, I guess I seek these.
Kind of where you're heading. Yeah, exactly. So for you, you've kind of went, this is what I'm happy doing. This is what I like. This is when I feel like I'm on fire. I love this stuff. That's what you should be doing. Now, having said that, I also don't want to put pressure on people to think of, maybe you don't know what your passion is. Maybe you don't have one.
Actually, a lot of people don't.
That's okay.
Yeah, I for one, always try to think, is that it? Or is that what I want myself to think,
Yeah.
It's funny how we complicate things, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. Don't overthink it. I like doing research. That sounds like everybody's afternoon of misery, but I love it. I just kind of lose myself in ideas and writing. I really like that. And I make time for that. So I literally get up at 6 to 8. That's what I do. And I think it's just about being more purposeful. You're never going to get the whole life that you want, but can we have more of a life we want?
Okay.
I think we can. And that might be, doing what you like maybe for 2 extra hours each week, or thinking about what you don't like. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, think about, sometimes we have relationships with people that we hang out with, but really they don't bring joy, interest, help, support. We don't even know why we do it. So
I think it's that incremental, I think that people sometimes find it boring, or maybe they might look at it and don't see that there is actually an achievement. But it's these little steps, like, as you said, if you do 1 or 2 hours of what you like per week, an extra 1 or 2 hours, then gradually build that up. It doesn't have to be like 0 or 100.
Exactly. And it also doesn't even need to amount to anything.
Okay.
Right? If you just like writing, write. You don't need to write a book. You just need to write nonsense. You can delete it. It doesn't matter. So I think it's also about, you don't have to have this beautiful accomplishment at the end. It's okay to do things just because you like doing them. That's what musicians do all the time.
So let's talk a little bit about high performance culture. So entrepreneurs, for instance, I've been an entrepreneur for a decade. There's so many entrepreneurs out there now, business leaders who are under a lot of stress. What is your advice to them? How can they incorporate positive psychology?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial landscape to begin with. So I'm a researcher, so I, read a lot of studies. So one of the things that we're starting to see is that there's a lot of mental health issues in the entrepreneurial community. Now, there's mental health issues everywhere, so it's not like we're targeting that group in particular. But, a number of people have sort of unpacked that and said, what's going on here? It's a high pressure lifestyle, long hours, huge responsibility, tons of money. Your survival depends on you. It's not an easy route. It's a very difficult path to take. It's not made for everybody, and you kind of have to have a little bit of the personality for it.
Yes.
We look at the failure rates for entrepreneurs. They're huge.
Yes.
Failure hurts, right? And so, a couple of studies have shown that, the rate of depression, for example, is twice as high in entrepreneurs. Anxiety, 3 times as high. Suicide attempts, suicidal ideation, also very high. Drug and alcohol addiction, also very high. And this is kind of causing people to say, wow, like, we really popularize and make the hustle culture quite sexy, quite attractive. Everybody wants to do it, but we also need to think of, there's a cost behind that. And then for those who make it, fantastic. Yay! But we don't talk enough about those who don't make it and what happens to them and what is the cost as well. Now, that doesn't mean don't do it. I'll never tell anybody, don't pursue your dreams. Knock yourself out. Go for it. We need people to achieve and accomplish and to feel alive in what they do. But also just understand there's a cost to that. And, how do we think of ways to mitigate some of those costs? Now, when you're working long hours, you're not maybe eating as well. You're not, stopping just for basic stuff, a glass of water. You haven't called your mom in I don't know how many weeks. You haven't spoken to your partner, if you remember you even have one, right? So I think what entrepreneurs can do, rather than take the mindset of hustle, take the mindset of an athlete. So if you think about Olympic athletes, they train super hard, high performance. The whole country is expecting them to get the gold medal. And when they don't, we just forget about them in a second. Sometimes we boo them like, how terrible. But they take themselves seriously. So when they're training, they pay attention to sleep. Big time. Sleep is important. They prioritize it. 9 o'clock, lights out. They also get up at 5 a.m. They stop for water breaks. They stop for good nutrition. They have a range of little meals throughout the day. They stop and stretch. They obviously are doing physical activity, but they make time. They prioritize things that are going to help their performance. And I think entrepreneurs, but also even just CEOs, senior leaders, anybody in a position of leadership has to do the same thing. Take yourself as seriously as an Olympic athlete. Take yourself as seriously as the CEO, who probably has a private trainer and a chef. You might not, but the idea is the same. You can't reach the top if you're tired. You can't reach the top if you're dehydrated. You can't reach the top if you haven't eaten. You can't reach the top if you're depressed and anxious. That in itself is going to impair your productivity and performance. So these are kind of things we need to be thinking of more often. So mental health issues, but also in that, how to be well. Is it something that's meaningful to you? Again, does it align with who you are? Does it bring out the best in you? Are you suited for that? Does it make you feel like you do, like, I'm on fire, bring it on. It's hard and I'm maybe going to cry in the car, but I love doing this, right? I come alive when I do this. So I think there's a number of different things that we can do. But one is just kind of making people aware that it's a costly route. It's a great one, but it's costly. So just be mindful of the costs and how do we mitigate those.
And it's unfortunately, I think it's expected. So, we do praise entrepreneurs that have 9 p.m. meetings and, weekend meetings and so on. And some of these have been wildly successful. And then you tend to think, okay, then it's either I'm going to kill myself or I'm not going to be successful. And I think investors, expect that or want that. And I also think that impacts the culture as well, within the startup or these high performance organizations. And again, it puts pressure on individuals, not only the entrepreneurs, but also the employees. So I was recently, talking to some startup founders and, they were having late meetings, on a daily basis. And I said, if I want to help you, and work with you, I can't do this. So, but there's no right or wrong, right? Like they have to do what they need to do.
They got to get there.
To get there. But that means that they may not be able to get certain talent or.
It comes at a cost.
Yeah.
Or, another thing we can think about is how do you do that? Again, by trying to mitigate or thinking about positive emotions and meaning. When we do things that are difficult and taxing, but we can have fun doing them, that buffers the impact of negative emotions. So I would say if they're going to have a 9 p.m. meeting, can we at least make it a fun one?
Yes.
Right? So can we
not over pizza, maybe over like a quinoa salad or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to get fat by the end of it.
Yeah, well, that too, right? But can we at least have fun doing it and forge good relationships so that, it is 9 p.m. We're going to have a cap. Everything ends by 10:15. But we need to enjoy this. But
there is that burnout. There is, I've experienced it. I haven't been a wildly successful entrepreneur, nowhere near.
You have.
But still, even within my little startup, I had working weekends, I missed out on holidays and so on. And mind you, again, I wanted to do that and it wasn't, it was part of what I wanted to do. But again, it does contribute to burnout.
Yeah. And it's not that you shouldn't do it. Like that is what it demands. So, so again, if you're going to be an Olympic athlete, you will be training for 10 hours a day. That's what it requires. But it's just to know that, again, if we think about an Olympic athlete, their career only lasts a couple of years.
Yes.
Because you can only sustain that for so long.
Yes.
Whereas if you're going to do that as an entrepreneur, understand that there's a cost to that. You can do it and enjoy it, but you have to mitigate that somehow because your career it may end sooner than you want for other reasons.
And you mentioned failure as a reason for high levels of depression, especially amongst entrepreneurs. So how do you deal with like failure? Is there again special tips or advice that you can share?
I think failure just sucks all the way around.
It just sucks. Yes, I agree.
It just sucks all the way around. But I think this is where also social support's important. The issue with I shouldn't say the issue with entrepreneurs, I should say the issue with the social support of entrepreneurs is that sometimes that support will say, just quit. It's fine. Look what it's doing to you, right? And the entrepreneur's like, why are you killing my dream? I want to see it through. What support should be doing is saying, do you need me to do your laundry? Do you want me to pick up your kids? How can I help you succeed at your dream? How can I help you mitigate that stress and not, help you disconnect from the dream? Like that's kind of like soul destroying. And when you have people around you who understand this is going to be hard, but I'm going to try and support this person, knowing that, they may fail. And when they fail, I'll be like, you know what? You're awesome. Like you're just still my hero for having done that. But so I think part of it is how do you, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, also thinking about who are you going to take along for the ride and specifically what do you need from them? And having those conversations, here's how I want you to support me. Failure then, if and when it comes, can be a little bit easier to handle.
Well, it's very likely to come, right? The odds are very high.
The odds are it will happen. Yeah. And I wish we also, as a society, talked about failure more often, because a lot of startups are like, we're going to make it. And you're thinking, I hope you do. Probably not. But to have these conversations out loud, there's a big chance this is going to fail. So what's going to be your backup plan if it doesn't work? And putting the failure on the table, having that plan B for it already so that people understand that may happen. I'm going to give it my best. Like we're going to go with plan A as long as we can. But if plan B happens, it's not the end of the world. I've also prepared for that. And it's not a personal failure. It's just, this is how it goes.
I think that's what it is, because people, how they always say entrepreneurs have their companies become their babies. So it does look like a personal failure.
Yeah, and it's not.
And it's tough.
The odds are it probably isn't going to work, and it's not about you.
Yeah. So talent, a big part of successful companies, successful startups. We often talk in this region about the inability of schools and universities to prepare people to become great employees, whatever that may be, the definition of that. But you always hear that they don't have the right skills. And I've experienced that a little bit firsthand when I had Nabish, because Nabish was a freelance marketplace, and the people that we wanted are on the platform were, students, for example, that wanted to get like a gig and get some work experience. And I did see it that really they do miss the kind of interpersonal skills to be able to price their services, talk to clients, manage expectations, etc. So I know you've done some work on that. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about schools and universities?
Yeah. So I can talk about that in two aspects. So one, I do teach at university, and even I see it in my students. I'm like, what? So there's definitely a mismatch. Absolutely. There's a mismatch between what industry needs and what students bring. There's a mismatch between what universities think they're doing and what students actually come out with. And there's also a mismatch between what parents want for their kids and how they think that is happening. So none of this is lining up. Okay, so maybe I'll start by telling you about some of the research I'm doing, and then we can sort of broaden that out. So one of the studies I'm working on right now with a co-author from Spain is looking at the PISA data. So PISA is an international achievement test that is done around the world with 15-year-olds.
Okay.
And the UAE does participate in that. So every single 15-year-old student takes the PISA test. So I have lots of students in my class who are like, oh yeah, I remember that. So we have thousands of respondents for the UAE, as we do all over the world. So my co-author and we've gotten the data for the UAE, and we've started to take a look at a number of interesting questions. So since 2015 and 2018, PISA is also collecting well-being data how happy kids are, and also mental health information. So basically, do these young people have mental health issues? And academic performance. So we've done a series of analyses. In our first analysis, what we found is looking at the UAE, we looked at only at academic performance. And what we found is that the difference between public and private schools is 3 years. Huge gap.
3 years.
3 years.
Okay, so they're 3 years more advanced than their peers.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are differences in schools, absolutely. Some students come out academically much stronger than others. That we see. And we also see it in other countries. But here, the gap is one of the widest in the world. Now, before you get smug and think about, oh, I'm from a private school, our second series of analysis looked at, okay, so let's look at the other question now. Never mind academic performance. Where are kids the happiest? And where do kids also have the highest mental health issues? And there we saw the complete opposite. So we saw that private schools, looking at a particular curriculum, and I'm just going to come out and say it because we're going to publish it soon, British curriculum, highest academic performance, highest mental health issues, lowest happiness.
Lowest happiness.
Lowest happiness.
Wow.
So total opposite of what we found in the academic performance. So we didn't expect to find that. We're like, oh boy, that's bad. And it's sort of, caused us to go, wow, what is this about? Like, how do we explain this? We started looking through the research and literature around high performance schools. And this is increasingly being talked about more and more. High performing schools are high performing, but there's cost to that. So they're kind of like little entrepreneurial incubators, same thing. People do really well academically and burn out.
Wow.
So kids are depressed, kids are anxious, kids are coping less well in these high-performing schools, and they're less happy. So again, we come back to positive psychology.
That is scary, to hear.
Living.
As a parent like myself, that's scary to hear because I think the last thing you want is your kids to be unhappy.
Yeah.
So what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, we're pushing them a lot. So this morning, I just put on my LinkedIn page, another article came out looking at how are parents driving this? And a lot of this is around parents' anxiety around their social status in society. Everybody wants the best for their kids. And we all hate to admit it, but, we do worry about what the neighbors are going to say and how well their kids are doing and what mom has to say, and particularly mother-in-law, right? And nobody wants to feel like a failed parent. And parents aren't doing it to push their kids. They're doing it because they love their kids. They want their kids to have great outcomes. But again, there's a cost to pushing. So there's some piece of responsibility there. There's also another piece of responsibility on schools. What is the goal of education? It's knowledge, yes. It's to function in society, yes. It's also to live a good life and to be happy and to contribute to society and to have good relationships and to be a responsible citizen and to follow the law and all of these other things. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. Schools are also to prepare students and young people for work. So sometimes, and there's lots of studies that have shown this as well, B students are more successful than A students in certain industries. In life, in many industries. And it's not that it's wrong to get an A. If you're really good at it and you like it and, it comes easy to you, fantastic. And for some fields, maybe you do need to get the A. But who's happiest? And it's usually, again, the B students. And a lot of A students end up working for B and C students. So in the classroom, I tell students, look, no one cares about your grades other than you and your mom. Let's be honest, like nobody cares, okay? Your employer is not going to say, show me your transcript. You only got an 84 in English. What was that? They don't care. They just want to know, do you have a degree? Good. Tell me more about you.
That's true.
So in the classroom, I will get students to do on-the-spot interviews and they suddenly realize, Miss, I have nothing to say. I know.
Yes.
I know. No one cares about your GPA. Tell me about you.
Yeah. And And this is, I think, what we're not focusing on and what we're not teaching kids. And I remember when I was graduating, and it's tough to write that first CV. Like, really, what do you say on it?
Nothing on it.
And I think it's the school's responsibility and the university's responsibility to encourage kids to do more, like more in terms of volunteering or doing special projects.
Work at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also incumbent upon parents as well to say, look, your kid's been studying for 4 hours. It's good. Go for a walk. Go play basketball. That's what I tell my students, like, just fine, a B and a C is good, but seriously, go join the basketball team. That will go much further in any job interview, and the skills you learn there will serve you in any workplace. And they don't believe me.
They don't believe you.
Most don't.
Yeah.
Most don't. And some might, and some are tempted by it. The other thing I see is just this fear of trying in case they fail. Mm-hmm. And this comes back to your question, how do we make failure more easy to experience when we have more of it?
You wrote something on your LinkedIn the other day, which really, really caught my eye, and I'm gonna read it out here. You said, "I'm happy to hug your kids, but I'd prefer if you did it instead." So what is that about?
Oh, now I'm gonna cry. No, I literally, young people are struggling. Uh-huh. They really are. And this young man.
This is university?
This is university.
Okay.
19 years old. Came to me after class, and, humming. It's always about a friend. Miss, I have a friend. This time it wasn't the friend. And he just burst into tears. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my dad is never happy with anything I do. And this kid was in pieces. And this is some 19-year-old kid. And I just went and hugged him. I don't know if that was allowed or not. But I was like, wow, this is a 19-year-old boy who really just needs somebody to say, I see you, mm-hmm. and you're fine. You're doing great. And that's my takeaway message for parents.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't worry about the grades. Your kids will be fine. Really push them on to go play basketball, go work at McDonald's, get a part-time job, go paint the neighbor's walls, whatever. Your kids are going to be fine, but they need to hear you love them and you're proud of them.
Definitely caught, I think, my attention, and a lot of people had commented on that. It really hit home, for sure. So I think this was great, really. Just maybe some final words that you'd like to leave us with, leave the audience with as well. We're all kind of suffering in one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go back to, this applies to me as well. It's post-COVID. We've got Ukraine and Russia. We've got climate change. That's going to be coming with a vengeance. Life is hard. It really is. And I think we need to really be thinking very thoughtfully and very purposefully about what matters. That answer is going to be different for everybody. And money does matter, absolutely. Feeling good about ourselves, accomplishments, success, that matters. But so do relationships. So do little moments of joy. So does being flexible. So does taking risks and failing and going, yeah, that really sucked. But hey, I learned all these things and it's cool. It's fine. And just, I guess I'd want to say that we just need to chill. Just chill. It's all good.
Okay.
I'm a doctor. Chill.
Yes. Doctor's advice.
Chill.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was great. Thank you for your time.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Conversations with Loulou. If you'd like to know more about Dr. Louise, you can visit her website, happinessmatters.org. You can also visit the show's website, conversationswithloulou.com, if you want to reach out to me. And you can also follow me on social media, on all social media platforms at the handle Loulou Khazen. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app to get the latest episodes. And if you're enjoying the show, please do leave us a rating or review. It really helps us in getting discovered. So I wish you a great day and see you in a few weeks.